Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. This week with us, we have a special member of the open source and the public security community joining us, Mark Fletcher, aka Fletch, from 911 Inform LLC. Very much an expert in all things public safety, security protocols, and everything goes with using a phone system the proper way. Thank you for joining us today, Fletch.
No, thanks very much, Luke. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to a larger international community that's involved in WebRTC.
Oh, so let's get started from. So I by reading your resume, I figured out that there's a lot I want to ask you. So I hope we have enough time today. I'm an engineer. I'm an application developer, but I do live, I don't know, a level above what you usually do, which is dealing with all the various public safety aspects. There are a bunch of laws, especially in the U.S., but they have mirrors in Europe and what from in various areas. There are something like Kari's law, Alyssa's law, Ray Baum Act, some 506, something like that. And first of all, what are those laws and why are they important?
Sure. So Kari's law was the law that I actually wrote.
Wow.
That was Kari's law states that you have to be able to dial 911 directly from a telephone system without an access code, without a prefix, without a postfix. It dictates that an on site notification mechanism needs to be in place so someone in the facility is aware that a station placed an emergency call. Um, and it needs to be able to get a call back
Hmm.
to the facility, not necessarily the device that made the call. And that could be, I may be on the floor having a heart attack. You don't want to call me back. I'm not really there.
Hmm.
Since we've got on site notification, that callback should go to somebody who is aware of the call. The Ray Bombs Act, Section 506, strengthens Kari's law in that it mandates that a dispatchable location needs to be provided to public safety,
Hmm.
and that same dispatchable location needs to be provided to whoever you notified internally of the call. So that dispatchable location is defined as the registered street address and whatever information is available that can direct emergency
Hmm.
responders to where that caller is in the building. Could be a floor, could be a room, could be a cubicle. Doesn't have to be anything specific, but just something that will show people where you are.
Okay. Yeah. So and that's
You brought up Alyssa's law, which
Mhm.
is kind of in the same field. Alyssa's law is more of a um, active notification or panic button for active shooters in school environments. So, kind of in the same environment, but something a little different than 911 calls.
Hmm. Okay. So and I'll continue. So our audience is usually technical. People will come from all aspects of open source, especially telephony, of course. But I think a lot of people don't really understand what those laws entail in their everyday work. What do I need to do to make sure that I comply with those laws?
Well, it's pretty simple, really, for the 911 laws. Um, the Carries law rules are very simple. I've got to have the dial plan set up so that if I dial 911, those
Mhm.
digits will go out to the PSTN as 911. Um, Not mandated by the law, but certainly a good practice. You should do the same with 112 and 000 and the other common numbers, especially if you've got an international audience in the facility. That's just good practice, common sense.
So 911 is mandatory. 911, sorry, is mandatory, while the others are just recommendations.
Right. The others are best practices. And right now, they don't conflict with anything in the US. So until they do at some point in time, I recommend programming them all because, you know, if you're over from Europe and you're used to dialing 112, when you have an emergency, you're going to react. You're not going to
Mhm.
think, you're just going to react. And that's why the dial 9 access code is really important to remove. And face it, Luca, that's a simple programming change in dial plan
Oh yeah, that's
resolution,
super
right?
easy for
That's
most
got to be
folks.
the most easiest thing to fix. Now,
That's
the other
definitely
thing is to provide notification. And again, an easy thing to fix from a developer perspective. I've got a device that dialed 911. I know what that device is, and I probably have a good idea of where it is in my facility. So I just provide that in a notification on screen, email, SMS, whatever. You want to provide some level of notification to somebody in the premises. And now you're Kari's Law compliant. That's easy.
So yeah, you're right. It's easy if you do it, and if you know you have to do it, like many things in telephony. So since you work with various WebRTC working groups, etc., I'm pretty curious. Does the fact that many communications now go through the browser, different channels who are not phones at all, have some implications here, or are these just requirements for phone systems? And if so, what are some good, maybe best practices? I mean, probably doing the same things, but from the browser. Still, it's not easy.
Yeah. So the really, it's interesting because WebRTC came on the scene, and the WebRTC VoIP type applications originally had all been excluded from the 911 rules, right? Because they weren't licensed as a carrier when they first started. Right, and that's how they got all they weren't controlled by the tariffs, which made them, a lot less expensive to operate. Now they are actually applicable because the most recent FCC rules say that any device that's capable of placing an outside call has to be 911 compliant. So now the WebRTC applications have been lumped into, you need to have something in there that brings you into compliance. And also the enterprise or commercial users of those applications, they wanted to make sure that they were providing a safe communications client, because what people don't realize is there's two sides of the law. There's the thou shalt side of the law, or thou shalt pay this penalty. But there is also, in the United States, personal liability, wrongful death lawsuits. Regardless of what the legislation says or doesn't say, what you've done has hurt my client.
Someone. Yeah, the phone system didn't when the police called back, the phone system didn't direct the call to the facility, but it went to voicemail because someone never configured an inbound trunk.
You got it. So let me give you the perfect example, Luca. In 2013, on December 1st, Kari Hunt, a mother of 3, was attacked by her estranged husband in a hotel. She was stabbed 29 times in the bathroom. Her 9-year-old daughter knew to dial 911, but didn't know to dial 911. There was a placard on the phone that said, for emergencies, dial 911. She was 9 years old. She was 9 years old, right? Kari died. And that's where Kari's Law started. So when that went to court for a wrongful death lawsuit, there was no law in place. There was no legislation anywhere. The jury awarded that family $42 million.
Yeah, I can see that happening. I mean,
no law. So that's why I tell people, you know what? These laws are great. They codify the issues, but really,
you have to be smart about it anyways. Yeah.
The laws and the fines are nothing compared to the personal liability wrongful death lawsuit and a lawyer saying you did this when you knew better. And the other laws just strengthen that.
Yeah, complying with the laws is important because it saves you from many of those situations. That's why the laws are there. But then you have to be careful to tackle others.
Yes.
So, well, since you're an expert, do you think there's anything that's not currently codified into law that should be a best practice and or become a law eventually missing like
Oh
this?
yeah. You know what? So not being legislatively intelligent, not knowing how it all works, when I started to help Hank Hunt, just being a 911 expert, yeah, this should be law. Yes, it should be
Yeah.
law. Let's write Kari's law. And I knew enough to say, well, we need to keep the law simple because I don't want to be here explaining all this technology to legislators. They're never going to get it. And
Yeah,
the
it will not go through more than anything. Like people will
right,
not, or what I've seen in other fields is that people simply end up not complying properly. Just if
exactly.
it's too complicated, it doesn't end up working.
So what we did, Luca, is we said, let's keep Kari's law simple. You got to be able to dial 911 without an access code. That's what killed Kari. And you've got to let somebody on property know that that has happened. And you have to support whatever number you advertise has to be called back to
Okay.
somebody that knows what's going on. That was Kari's law. Quick, down and dirty and simple. And the biggest part, it didn't cost anything.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Most systems can be programmed to do all of those.
Yeah, plus it really takes. I mean, I'm thinking about Friswitch, which I know very well, but also Asterisk, which I've used for a while. Takes maybe 15 minutes between logging and making the change or restarting. It's really
Exactly. And what I did is I went out to, at that time I worked for Avaya, a large PBX manufacturer. I went out to my dealers and distributors and said, guess what? You guys are going to go out to your customers and you're going to fix this for free. Because number one, most of you can do it remotely.
yeah.
You should be going out to do it on site and check it. And it's only 15 minutes anyway. And if your customer has a maintenance contract, this should be covered under maintenance because 911 is broken.
And otherwise, yeah, you risk huge damages for nothing.
And
At that point,
a few people were upset with me. You're making me go out and do stuff that I'm not getting paid for. Well, all I can tell you is a live customer is a paying customer. Do what you want.
and at some point, I think the liability would fall not only on the customer, which is
Yeah.
still the owner of the phone system, but if you, as a maintainer, as a supplier, etc., knew that
Yeah.
you should make those changes and didn't do them, I think you end up being liable too, right? It's
You're culpable in the whole thing. So I schemed this master plan and I guilted all of the vendors into doing that. And I had vendors that were actually out there, and I won't name them, of course, but I actually had vendors who would take people with a system that was 6 months old and perfectly capable of being programmed the way it needed to be programmed and telling customers, oh, you've got to buy a new phone system for $20,000. And I
wow,
would just
just because it needed to supply that.
yeah, and I would embarrass those guys publicly, and
Yeah,
you know, I know a couple that went out of business because nobody would buy a phone system from them after they tried to pull that stunt. But you know what? Who cares at that point?
I
This
mean,
is
I
life
know what
safety.
we can do. So since I really know what we can do with the with phone systems, again, it really takes 15 minutes. Just do it, guys. It's not even
Yeah.
it's a no brainer. Plus, things like it's super. Always, I mean, it's almost funny or twisted that caller IDs are wrong. Like, why are you going out to a phone number that's wrong, man? It's just
Well, that's what so part of the problem, Luca, is you understand how to make your system dial 911,
yeah.
but you may, or a lot of people don't understand how the 911 system works. They think that data is actually leaving the PBX and going into the 911 network, when in reality, it's just caller ID. That caller ID leaves your PBX into the network, and at the 911 center, just like any other call center application, they read the caller ID, they do a lookup in the state database, and then they
Yeah.
retrieve whatever record is associated with that caller ID. So it's almost pre-provisioned at that point. But people end up sending bad caller IDs, wrong caller IDs, the caller ID of somebody else, which is the security risk of that.
Yeah, I'm always wondering. Some carriers are. I mean, we. I don't want. I mean, I want to advertise SignalWire a little, but also I don't want to do it too much. We are very careful with caller IDs. You can only call with numbers you own, numbers you verified. If something is suspicious, just to block it out of making sure. Then we'll email the customer and say, hey, you tried using this caller ID. Maybe it's just something that you failed to verify, but just checking. But there are plenty of carriers, not the larger ones that we work with, but smaller carriers, especially European, because frankly, in Europe, the whole caller ID thing, we have far less legislation. It's a bit of it looks like the far west of old.
Yeah, it does.
And you can, there's a bunch of trunk suppliers that will allow you to set whatever caller ID. That's just super weird.
And that's problematic, right? Because there are carriers. There were some large carriers, but they've locked that all down. But still, the small carriers, like you said, they'll let you send whatever caller ID that you want. So think about this. The 911 networks, it's very siloed in the US regionally. So the areas are pretty much contained to the old free calling areas. They kind of operate in a little silo there. And the silos don't talk to each other. That's bad in one respect, but from a spoofing perspective, it kind of contains the damage. But if I can get into a local 911 network or a calling area, I can send any caller ID that's valid in that calling area and get routed to the 911 center associated with that address. So if you lived in southern New Jersey and I lived in northern New Jersey, all of New Jersey is one big calling area for 911. That's just the way the network is set up. I could spoof your number,
and
call 911, and end up swatting you like that. Now, the only thing I'd have to do is get a small carrier that allowed me to send whatever caller ID I wanted unverified. Sure. And again, that's happening less and less now, but there's still a few out there that will do it.
So since we're on the topic of numbers you can buy, caller IDs, etc., I'm curious about this because I sort of know, but I never really figured that out. Right now, I can buy a number from California and use it from my office in Atlanta. I used to run a consulting business there before we joined SignalWire, and the office is still there. But I can buy a voice over IP number from California, from anywhere, including SignalWire, and use it on my SIP phone and even put it on the office PBX. And now people in Atlanta are dialing out with a California number. What happens if that number calls 911? Like, how is that the data actually transmitted? Because I know we have to set it manually on the number. We always do, and we have a default. So every time we buy a new number, it has the correct address. But there's a database somewhere, right?
Yeah. So I'm gonna break that into two parts. First, you're getting a number from California that you are putting on a legacy PBX that's got physical trunks where you are located. Okay. So your 911 calls are going to go out into the local calling PSTN just like every other number. Because of number portability, that number will be contained in the local 911 routing database with your proper address. So there's no issue. You're going to go to your local 911 center and they're going to see an out of area number, but they're going to get a local address. And this used to confuse public safety, but now with number portability, they see it all the time. Oh, okay, that's just
they just care about the address.
They just care about the address.
Yeah.
Now, the second part of your question is you're putting it on your SIP PBX.
Yeah, which is what we have.
Your SIP PBX doesn't have localized trunks. your SIP PBX is somewhere up in the cloud. Your SIP PBX on a 911 call, you have to send your 911 traffic to an entity called a VPC, Voice over IP Positioning Center. Maybe bandwidth, maybe Intrado, maybe somebody else that's using those backend services. There are 4 national 911 VPC providers, right? IntelliQuint, I always forget one. IntelliQuint, Intrado, Bandwidth, and Comtech. Wow, I always forget one of the 4.
Yeah.
But those are the 4. So your 911 call is being handled by one of those. In their database, your number, wherever it's from, is basically the routing guide for that is set to this 911 center. And then IntelliQuint, whoever, Intrado, Bandwidth, they get it to the local 911 networks, legacy networks, however they get their connectivity there.
They get the right thing. Yeah, they get the right thing figured out. So something that I was reading on your bio, and it's really super interesting. You've pardon me if I ask obvious questions, but this is a topic that we never touch on the podcast. So I'm really super interested.
Sure.
It mentions that there's databases capable of providing even floor plans to law enforcement, so they will know that my room is on the 3rd floor on the right side of the building.
Yep. So a name you probably know, Henning Schulz-Rini.
Yeah.
One of the founders of SIP and one of the authors of a lot of the protocols. I met Henning when he was working with the Illinois Institute of Technology and also at the FCC. And he was actually became CTO at the FCC. But I was presenting about 12 years ago at the IIT RTC conference. And I had an idea at that point of what I called over-the-top next-gen 911. And my idea was that I would get a phone call over the legacy networks to 911 like I normally would. However, simultaneously, I would use the internet to get to, in a dual path, to get to public safety with the data that I had about the caller. I knew Luca called 911. I knew Luca sat here. I had all this data about Luca, and I was going to use the internet in an over-the-top model to deliver that data to the PSAP. Concept on paper looked cool. In reality, boy, the security model, how to build it, forget it.
Super sensible data. Like you can't just tell people where someone else lives, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I can't tell the local police department that has no IT staff, you're going to establish 20,000 point-to-point connections with companies. That's not scalable. But the concept worked, right? The data flow worked. And I presented that, and Henning was in the audience, and he said, "That's very interesting. Would you present this to the FCC?" And then in the spring of the following year, I presented that at the FCC, and all the carriers and everybody in this meeting went, "Oh my God, that's simple." And they went back to work to figure out how to make that model work. So companies like RapidSOS came into existence, where they've partnered with Google and Apple to where they're sucking that data out of the smartphones. And then they're using that over-the-top model with a relationship they've established with 911 centers. So now they're a broker in the middle for all of the content creators to transmit their data to. And they're a broker for the 911 centers that can subscribe, pun intended, to that information. hey, this number just called me 911. Oh yeah, that's Luca. Here's the info I've got on Luca. And let's publish that to them. Now, me being on the enterprise commercial side and being an advisor, technical advisor into Rapid SOS, I said, hey, Michael, when you turn this up for commercial, I know you're building it for wireless, but when you turn it up for commercial, I want in because I want to publish my data. Okay, sure, you can come into my database. So now the concept back when I presented this to the FCC was in the existing legacy 911 records, there is a 20-character field called address line 2. It's rarely used, but it's used to provide discrete location information.
Yeah, it's not very long, but then
not very long, but it's long enough to hold a bit.ly.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, there we go. I'll put the light bulb right above your head there on the video screen. Bingo, now you got the picture. I'm going to put a bit.ly in that address to line 2 field. I'm going to use Rapid SOS to get my data to any 911 center and put it on their screen in the content that they're already looking at. They're going to click the link, which goes back to my server, and I'm going to feed them a floor
information,
plan. Or I'm going to feed them a real-time WebRTC video link. Or I'm going to feed them a map with temperature sensors. Or I'm going to feed them whatever information I've got. It doesn't matter.
Once you link it back into the system, you can pretty much do what you like and prefer. The sky's the limit, right?
And I can also provide a floor plan of that building with icons that are interactive. So I've got a two-way communication between public safety and the caller. And the cool part about this, Luca, is because it uses WebRTC, I can send you, whoever you are, a link and bring you into that interactive interface. So I can share it with not only the dispatcher, who really doesn't need that information, but the first responder in the field, and I can put it on this device.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they can walk in the building with a map in their hand.
Go, it's here. Yeah.
Pretty effing cool is all I can say.
Going back to the caller ID thing, I think this highlights how important it is for everybody to review, learn, and apply Stir Shaken.
Wow. Imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, we are compliant. SignalWire actually built I think it's the reference Stir Shaken open source implementation at the moment. It's called Live Stir Shaken. It's open source, so people use it as a command line tool everywhere. But really, it's important how people should I mean, June 2021 was last year.
Yep.
People should have been compliant by now. Still, I don't see too many calls coming in with the correct signature or certificates, etc. There's a lot to be done there still. I keep saying that, but I hope eventually happens.
Stir Shaken is like bacon. And as my shirt says, that's too much bacon, said no one ever.
Yeah, same thing. Stir Shaken. Shaken actually, so the shaken part of Stir Shaken is not very different from what you described in public safety. Of course, it's less important, but effectively it's an over-the-top database so that PSTN devices can still find information about a number and verify the caller. I think shaken part is what's being is lagging behind, because the Stir stuff like certificates, signatures, I don't know how much, but I think engineering ran percentages, and it's like 60% to 70% of calls now come in with the proper signature. So still, it's doing well. But Shaken, I don't think does Shaken even exist right now. I don't even think that.
I'm not. I think it conceptually exists. I'm sure some people built some lab stuff that's Shaken-ish. if you will. I'll
I
invent
like
a new
I
verb
like
there,
the
shakenish.
definition. It's shakenish.
Shakenish, yes. So
It's a,
people understand it. People see the value in it. I don't think people always have the use case for it, but public safety is an excellent use case for it.
it's a very good starting point. Like if you don't do it for anything else, do it because it's important to have the proper color IDs.
I think what's really got to be vetted is validation of the data, right? So I've got the ability to create data, give it to the network, ensure that it's going to maintain its integrity, and get it all the way to the intended person who's going to be able to view it. And I can put all the security on top of that of who's allowed, who, whatever. What's still not covered is the validity of my data,
Oh, I see.
right?
Yeah, or
You
maybe
know, I
even
could
just
say
the
this pen is blue.
that's not true. Even
That's
if
not
you say
true,
so, yeah.
but
You
I'm
can
still
say that all
saying
you
it
want.
is. Yeah. So how do you validate my data? I'm not sure
Hmm.
that's been addressed yet. That's an operational problem, um, and it needs to be addressed.
That's a very good point. And I mean, I subconsciously I would have agreed, but if you think about it, that's really important. Like I can at the end, the data I enter for that the ID I just bought from Los Angeles, but in reality our office in Atlanta, I enter the data.
Yeah,
I could put in a different address, and suddenly that will be my problem or whoever's problem, really. Because the flip side of the 911 calls is that I could try and make something bad happen at that address by calling the police and saying my house is on fire and there's people firing guns and whatnot, and they go to that address, right?
absolutely. That's swatting. That's what happens when people SWAT, and people have been killed. In Kansas City, there was an incident where somebody was, and it was the kid was swatting the other kid over a game of Call of Duty or some stupid stuff,
Oh
and,
wow, yeah.
and they sent the police. They said, "Oh, I just killed somebody, and I'm going to shoot more people." The police go there. A guy comes out, and I don't know. He made some move that was suspicious, and somebody shot him.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, I don't fault the police too much. You don't know what you're going into sometimes, so
Exactly.
better
Well,
be careful.
they caught the swatter. He was a professional swatter
Oh wow,
from California, and they arrested him, and now he's on trial for murder.
well, you better be.
So, I mean, this is the problem where developers need to be careful, but they need to be aware. They got to make sure that they're not opening the door. They're not creating the matches and giving them to the little kid to go play with, right? You have to be very careful with this technology. You have to be responsible. Um, I'm not sure how you establish that. Is it a set of keys that says you are a vetted, established developer? So you've got access to this? Do I
Hmm.
get keys as a content creator? Yes, I've been vetted. I've earned the right to create content.
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah,
that's a
it's
big lift.
all of that is. I mean, there's a lot there that crosses over into privacy, into freedom of speech territory. It's not easy. Like it's not easy to legislate at all. That's why honestly, I mean, I never met anyone who had actually authored a law. So I think Kari's law is looks like it's written by an engineer because it's super useful, super smart, and it's like it can be described in 3 lines. So that's
Thank
that's
you.
that's how the engineers so write all laws from now on because we just do it better. Like
Thank you. Thank
it
you.
covers all the.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure I've ever had anybody tell me that before, but thanks very much.
It's very engineering. Like how do you fix that? Like this,
Yeah.
perfect. Which is what we should do in many cases, as
Well,
opposed
you know
to.
what? That's what I was told to do to make sure that the legislators understood it. It needed to be simple, straightforward, and that's how we wrote it.
Yeah, and I think you that your remark raises a very good point for thought. That as technology people, sometimes we literally have trouble making ourselves understood to non-technical people that are ultimately the ones who call the shots in government. So you have a very good idea, you know what should happen, but half of it is acronyms. And it's super hard to make it understood. What half of it is 5-letter acronyms,
Yeah.
and it's super hard to just, how do you explain that? Then you have to explain every acronym, and many of those acronyms actually contain more acronyms in their names, and then it goes all the way down. It's kind of like turtles all the way down. It's really hard to use. So
Yeah, it
that's
becomes
really hard.
it becomes WTMA. Way too many acronyms.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that, but I'm going to use that in the next meeting when we work on something technical. That's just WTMA, guys.
Yeah, WTMA. Way too many M. So there's actually another letter. It's WTMFA, but I'll keep that one clean.
Yeah. It is. It's a problem, and that also crosses over into sales and commercial territory. Like
Oh yeah.
sometimes you're trying to explain a solution to a prospective customer as a solutions architect. I do that all the time, and you get. I mean, it being my job, I like to think I'm good at it, but sometimes you have to stop for a split second and think, hey, if I pull out this set of words and acronyms, I'm going to lose this person right away. Maybe not lose the contract, but I'm going to lose the retention. Like their eyes just glaze over. They start waiting for the end of the boring guy speaking, and they look forward to the sales account manager going back on the mic. So that, okay, now I can speak with someone that actually speaks my language. So it's
I'll write the
very,
check. I'll write the check. No more acronyms.
yeah, please let me go. I know I instantly know I need this, but I don't know why, but I'll trust you. So that's the part. That's
Yeah.
the hard part. So yeah, communication is important. Well, open source in general is about communication. In fact, I'll ask you one more question. Do you
Sure.
think the open source community should do more when it comes to security and public safety, or I think this is already going well? I think we're not too bad. It's one of the areas where we're actually doing better.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you
Well,
from a public safety perspective. I think, it's really cool. It's really easy to build, asterisk and free switch and to do all these things to solve the communications problem. But I got to tell you, Luca, nobody thought about emergency services
before.
until it was way too late.
Hmm.
And I think had this been a requirement
From the start.
from the start, we would be living in different times. Because it wasn't there from the beginning, it was, and I build this way too. Oh, great, I got an idea. Let me get the least amount of parts I need to get it working from A to B. Here's my proof of concept. And now I'm going to build up the other stuff around it to make it what it needs to be. And the public safety piece, because no one ever understood how that machine worked, it was just there.
Oh yeah.
No one understood it. So they just kind of put it on top and it didn't really fit. And it was a wobbly connection. So they had a square box with a ball sitting on top of it that would roll around. And sometimes it would be in the right spot and sometimes it wouldn't. And sometimes it would fall off.
So yeah, in general,
That's the best analogy.
more attention to the side effects. Well, you raised that before. In many cases, systems don't really have a provision for checking any of the data that is entered. You might not think that's the developers right. Developers shouldn't care about that because they just make the software, but sometimes it will be better to add some kind of, I don't know, even just a checkbox that says I understand that by entering this data and blah blah. That way you can get, well, me at least have people think about it twice, which is
You got to raise
generally,
the awareness of the user, right?
yeah. If you enter your address wrong in this box and you call 911, the police will go at that address. So make sure you don't.
Well, so then now you're advertising how to SWAT.
Yeah, then you're right. It's not simple to get the right wording for everything. It's super.
But let me give you an example. Here's something that we did because we report the location of users. So users are on mobile devices. I take my laptop home. Okay, where are you? I'm at home. It's very simple for me to turn on location services in the device and look from a GPS perspective where you are. And I will get a rough but fairly close estimate. Now you put it in an address. Now I can validate. The next thing someone's going to come back and say, "Well, wait a minute. I don't have Wi-Fi in my laptop, or I don't have, it doesn't have a cellular GPS location." Okay, fine. Your device doesn't have location, but you just logged on. But I know you have a cell phone. So I send a text message to your cell phone. Hey, Luca, do me a favor. Click this link and verify your location. So now when you click the link, WebRTC, I suck the location of your phone, your mobile phone, out into the database and says, well, Luca's mobile phone is here. I know he's at his PC, and he told me he was here on the PC. There's no location on the PC, but it does match his mobile phone.
Yeah,
Okay.
or rather it doesn't. Or maybe it doesn't have to be super precise.
I know you're pretty close to where you said you were.
If it says I'm in a different county, then something's clearly
and
wrong.
And by the way, you're at a pre-registered address that you use all the time. So I've got you telling me you're here. That address is a pre-known address, and your mobile phone is close enough to where that is. You know what? That's assign whatever you want to it. That's a 90% chance that you are where you are, or better.
Yeah, it's for sure. Yeah, it's built out of a few key points, but you're right. It's generally people will be in the same 5 or 6 places all the time. I mean,
so I won't quite call that AI. I think that's stretching a little bit, but it's logical calculations of, hey, I got 3 data points that all match. Good enough for me. So you could even establish different levels for different types of users.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can take that wherever you want to go. So developer, think of that as logic to build into your stuff.
I trust this guy more because it's been a customer for a longer time, so I know his data should be correct, and that's the aspect. Cool. So
Zoom added Zoom Phone, and they go in and they give you a way to calculate or to provision your 911 service in there. Okay, well, they picked one provider and kind of hard coded that in there. I don't really agree with that. I think they would have been better making that piece open source so the customer could choose what they wanted to, but at least they stuck something in there. I'll give them credit for that.
Yeah, for sure.
But how many other platforms have done that? I haven't really seen any.
No, there's not many, for sure. Well, this was, I mean, thank you so much. It's a lot to process, so I'll let people dwell on it. And if you have any, I mean, I assume the audience can reach out if there's anything like might be some consulting, checking
Absolutely.
on their systems.
So
it's such a specialized topic that I really urge people to just go talk to the experts. Don't do it yourself if you have dubs, because this is not, I mean, this is more than just your phone system working or not working. This is about security. It's about safety more than security, really.
Sure.
And that's what needs to be done. Cool.
No, I've got a lot of blog content out on the web. So if you Google Fletch 911, you'll find me on the web. You can publish all my contact information. I like talking to this kind of audience because I can talk and not have to translate in my head into plain speak. I can say things that I can't say to other people. And again, like what I was explaining to you, my over-the-top concept with the embedded bit.lys, I like seeing the light bulb go off, going, oh yeah, of course, that's easy. That makes me feel like I've done my job. So that's great.
Great. So, well, again, thank you for joining us. It was great. And we have a conference coming up in October if you'd like to join us. It's called ClueCon, and it's from October 15th to 21st. And I'm doing first switch training on the last day if someone wants to join. It's in Chicago, and, well, we'll have videos online too, etc. So we'll be there.
Great.
And again, Fletch, thank you very much. And it was such a pleasure talking to you today, especially given that we don't give enough attention to this topic.
No problem, Luke. Anytime you need anything, or you want to follow up on other pieces of this as it evolves, feel free to give me a call.
Thank you very much. And for the rest of you, I'll see you next week. Have a nice week and goodbye.
Take care.